What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is a partner who enjoys helping people disrupt the hospitality space. His 20 plus years of experience has seen him involved in all projects across the globe. He's represented billions of dollars in acquisitions in both the residential and commercial space. He's a partner at Baker Hostetler and co-leader of the hospitality industry team. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Diener. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Dan. Great to see you again.
It's great to see you too. And then for those of you listening who love our hospitality industry so much, one of the things I love is I get to go to a lot of events and dinners. And I met Jeff at a dinner that we were both invited to. It was a lovely affair in Los Angeles. And Jeff was sitting to my left. And I know many, what struck me about the meeting, and we can talk about this later, I know a lot of lawyers. I've met tons of them. I have friends who are lawyers. But when Jeff started talking about his specialty in hospitality, he just lit up. And I was like, wow, I've never actually met a lawyer who is so passionate about lawyering. And a lot of it in talking to him had to do with hospitality industry. So I thought it would be a really interesting conversation to have him on and talk about it and share his excitement with all of you. So Jeff, thank you for sharing and putting yourself out there with myself and all the listeners.
Of course, I'm happy to do it. As you know, you and I talked about, I mean, we could talk hospitality all day long and never run out of things to chat about. And it is the thing that keeps me doing what I do.
Most people, I would think, when they think of lawyers, they think of contracts, words, litigation, putting deals together. And I'd love to hear what is the most exciting part about all of that for you as far as your vocation with respect to hospitality. But first, if we could go back to that dinner and when you started talking about why you love hospitality so much, like what does it mean to you or how do you define it?
Well, the way I define it in the context of my business and in providing service, it's creating the right combination of satisfaction, comfort, security, and enthusiasm for each individual client.
And how, like when you were going through law school or undergrad and you were, before you were practicing, before you took the bar, like, did you have any vision that you would be in the hospitality sector? So I guess the question would be then, how did you figure out this silo, if you will? And when did you know that the hooks were in you and you never wanted to leave?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a career path that I think I could recreate again today. I mean, there were so many twists and turns, and I just sort of landed where I did. I mean, obviously, a big part of it is being prepared for each opportunity as it comes your way. But, I did my undergrad at Cornell, which, as you know, is like the epicenter for all things hospitality. But I wasn't in the hotel school. I was actually in arts and sciences, but I did a lot of my coursework at the hotel school. I even TA'd a finance course at the hotel school. But as I was going through it, I had absolutely no idea that I would end up in the hospitality industry. And I had no idea I was going to end up as a lawyer one day. So, I after undergrad, I ended up actually working for a small startup company that we were doing business in Russia and eventually Eastern and Central Europe, which had nothing to do with hospitality. And then after a few years of that, I ended up going back to school to earn my MBA. And the law degree was really, it was a tack on, frankly. It was something I was always interested in just from a purely academic, nerdy perspective. I mean, I never really thought I was going to practice, but law school was something that always interested me. So when I went back to do my MBA, I ended up doing the joint degree program.
What's a JD MBA?
Yeah, JD MBA.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
By the way, being in school in Los Angeles for 4 years, after having worked for a few years, was not a terrible thing. So
Right.
The surfing and skiing was not all bad. You definitely have more of an appreciation for the academic lifestyle after you've worked for a few years. So to anyone who's gone straight through from sort of high school, undergrad to law school, I'm always thinking, nah, like you're missing out. Like take a few years off and then go back to school. Like really appreciate the time out from the rest of your work life.
Mm.
Um, but so much of it came down to the people that were around me. I mean, every opportunity I had and every sort of career move, it somehow revolved around the people that were near me at the time, right? Or that I was in their presence at the time. And so, I was going to grad school and I ended up summering at a law firm, and I didn't expect to like it nearly as much as I did. And it actually had nothing to do with hospitality. It was mostly bankruptcy and restructuring related. But the people who I was exposed to were great. I mean, incredibly intelligent, really passionate about what they did. And it gave me pause to think about, well, maybe this law firm thing, I'll do it for a year, maybe two, get some experience, and then I'll go back into the business world.
Well, and that's another intriguing thing, because most of the people that I know that I grew up with that went on to law school, or the lawyers that I knew earlier on in my career, they started practicing law and then they got specialized into a specific
Uh-huh.
business. So it's also cool to see you, who's just so passionate about practicing law and overlaying, like making a Venn diagram of the hospitality world as well. So keep going on that thread.
Yeah, well, look, I get bored easily, right? So hospitality is great because it's it's a complicated real property asset, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's an operating business layered on top of real estate. So you have all of the normal real estate issues that you would have, plus an operating business on top of that. So any deal that I tend to get involved in, I'm inevitably working with people who specialize in other things like IP, tax, corporate issues, litigation, employment. So I'm constantly getting to meet new people and work with different people by virtue of that. It was the same thing that drew me to restructuring and bankruptcy when I started my career, which is, again, that's an area of law where it just involves so many different areas of expertise that you can't possibly know it all. And
Mm.
I'm not interested in trying to know it all, but it's great to be able to call other people and draw upon their expertise and their interests, and sort of what makes them excited about coming in every day. So the transition really from restructuring and bankruptcy to hospitality happened when I was a very, very junior associate. And I was tasked to work on the bankruptcy of a chain of steakhouses. We had like 56 steakhouses around the United States. So it sort of started with an entry point into the restaurant world. And then, I mean, again, it's just totally unpredictable, right? So I was practicing in LA, and then I knew I wanted to be overseas. I was trying to find a new gig in either Moscow or London, both places I'd spent time in before, both markets that I had some familiarity with.
And it's
And a
great
recruit,
cover as like a spy also.
oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
would I would imagine. I wouldn't know firsthand, but I would think so.
Or
Um,
you could tell me, but then you'd have to kill me.
yeah, no, I don't want to do that. We just got this podcast started. That would be a very short podcast. Um, yeah, so recruiter out of the blue said, have you ever considered Asia? And I said, no, I have never considered Asia. It's literally probably the one market I know the least about. He said, well, would you consider it? And at that time, I was a fourth or fifth year associate. And again, I had zero interest in making partner at a law firm.
Hmm.
It just wasn't in my mind. So I said, yeah, look, if there's a right fit with the right firm, I would definitely consider relocating to Asia. I mean, I'd love the experience. And I interviewed with a few different firms. And at the end of the day, I flew out to meet with one group. I flew out in February, and on the flight back, I decided, let's do this. And by April, we were living in Tokyo and did that for 3 years. And it was tremendous. And it was actually during that period of time that I started doing more hospitality related deals, because our firm had a really strong expertise in that. So I worked on like ski resort deals while I was there, and other deals all around Asia, hotel deals, golf course deals. And that started the ball rolling. I thought, oh, this is interesting stuff. This is really fun. I could see doing more of this. And then when I came back to the U.S. in 2008, um, that was when the worlds of real estate and restructuring were colliding, unfortunately, for
Yeah.
most people. But I was really comfortable in bankruptcy court. I knew my way around the bankruptcy code reasonably well still at that point, and I knew my way around real estate. So it kept kind of going. And one of the big cases that I worked on was the restructuring of a W property in New York. And then again, it just kind of builds up from there. It's
Which
like
one was it?
it was the one at
Like
it
in the
was
40s?
downtown
Oh, downtown.
at
Union Square?
Union Square. It was W Union
Okay.
Square. Yeah,
It's an interesting property right now for W and for Marriott because they don't own very many assets,
right.
right? They've divested them and
Mhm.
they're really focused on the brands and the operations of the brand, but they actually bought that building to reimagine the W experience. So it's like
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting property. Talk about a great location, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really fun part of the city. I used to live a block away from there, so I knew the area reasonably well. But yeah, so it just kept kind of growing from there. And then I moved to London for a few years, which it was another one of those funny conversations where um, we were still sort of in the recession, and my boss came to me. He actually came to me right before lunch and said, "Come see me after lunch. You and I need to talk."
Hmm.
And of course, you hear that and you're like, "Oh my god, that can't be good." Um, so I basically wait an hour and then go to his office. You wanted to chat, and he starts telling me all about his time in London because he had actually headed our entire real estate group for a period from our London office. And he just went on and on about what a great experience it was and how much he and his family enjoyed it. Well, that's great, great. And at the end, he said, so what do you think? And I said, well, I'm glad it was such a positive experience for you. It sounds wonderful. And he kind of looked at me like I was an idiot. And he said, no, how would you like to go to London to head our group over there? And I thought, oh, that's what this conversation was actually about. I said, oh yeah, absolutely. I'm in. This is great. I'm excited about this opportunity. We're in. And, relocated the family over there.
Wow.
Um, and had 3 amazing years there. And again, my time there, I actually chaired, or I should say co-chaired, ULI's Hospitality Council, European Hospitality Council. And my fellow co-chair was also a lawyer. And people used to comment all the time that they were amazed at how well he and I collaborated and worked on stuff together. And it's just, he's just another kind of like-minded person where he enjoyed working with people rather than opposite people. And once in a while, you get lucky with that.
Hmm.
I just got a note from a lawyer today. He and I just worked on it was actually a very contentious matter. He represented a tenant of and my client was a landlord, and his client just picked up and left, basically abandoned the space at my client's hotel. So contentious. But that said, we got a settlement agreement done. I think it took us a week and a half, maybe from start to finish, to get the whole thing done. We just signed it yesterday. And, he wrote me this nice note saying, like, our industry is filled with a certain type of person. It's great to come across somebody else once in a while who just knows how to get things done, who just gets it. And so you get lucky once in a while. It's sort of those few moments of ups that keep you going, for all the other ones where you're working with people who don't get it.
So, in many conversations with just other entrepreneurs and lawyers, I get the feeling that, and I've heard this said a lot, and I'm probably going to say it ineloquently, but in the world of lawyers out there, there's deal makers and deal breakers, right?
Hmm.
And it
Absolutely.
from what you just said there, and the deal maker. the deal makers are more rare than the deal breakers because it's much easier to tear something down than to find those synergies and make it work.
Absolutely.
And what you just said right there made me think about that. So if you were to go back over your career and look at pre-hospitality and now in hospitality, do you find that there's from the mindset of your clients and all the stakeholders in the projects and the deals that you're doing, do you find that in hospitality there's more of those deal maker types rather than the deal breaker types?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
God, that's a great question. Why are the deal makers drawn to hospitality? In other words, why is there a disproportionate number of deal makers rather than deal breakers in hospitality? Um, I mean, like in my case, I came from a business background, and business is all about relationships and getting deals done at the end of the day. Even when you're fighting over a pie, right? Like, like in a restructuring context, it's sort of between creditors and debtors. It's like, who's going to get what sliver of this finite asset? Whereas in other transactions, you're actually able to create something better by bringing the two sides together, right? Like you've
Mm.
got your brand on the one hand and the owner on the other who has this great asset, and you bring them together, and you can make so much more of this building. Um, Maybe there's something about, you know, the industry itself where, again, if you look at how people define hospitality, I think it's always in the context of service, like providing service, right? I mean, I would imagine you would know this much better than I would hosting this podcast. Like, I imagine people's answers somehow always connect to providing service. So it seems like it's sort of service minded people are drawn to hospitality. I mean, otherwise, you're definitely in the wrong business, right?
Yeah. So in doing this podcast for 150 or 60 episodes, I don't remember what the count is right now. The definition is always moving and elusive.
Hmm.
I do think service plays a huge part of it. And it's like real, again, using that Venn diagram idea, there's a bunch of them, but I think a lot of it is also just service, empathy, and really meeting others where they are. And as
Hmm.
far as like being a deal maker, you you really have to strive to meet the person across the table from you where
Yeah.
they are. It's like a guest who's just got in from a red eye or flew back to Tokyo from, got in late. They're harried. They might not want to. They're not hairy. Well, they could be hairy, but they're like their mind is
Fatigue.
other. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fatigued, and maybe they want some extra service. Maybe they just want to go
Yeah.
to the room and take a shower. But it's all about like seeing that, recognizing that,
Mhm.
and meeting the others where they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, like in the context of most of my negotiations, right, there's some easy softballs where there's a point that's very important to the other side and not at all important to our side.
Hmm.
You give, right? It's easy to give that one up and say, great, that's really important to you. It's not important to us. Let's accommodate you on that point, right? Then there are the more challenging points where it's important to both of us, or if it's binary, right? Like it's sort of one side can get it and the other side doesn't get it, right? Those are the more challenging ones to work through. But again, I think it's a matter of trying to figure out, okay, we're looking at this in a binary way. Maybe there is a third
When you say
option.
a binary way, is that kind of that idea of like it's a zero sum game? Like, okay, there's only this much. You're going to get this much. I'm going to get this much. But I guess maybe, and this is kind of where it's interesting, is like in that deal making thing, it's trying to find a place where everyone wins, right? And it's like a
Exactly.
1 + 1 = 3 or 5 or 10, and that's really
Exactly.
hard to do.
It's hard to do, but if you're creative, you can figure it out. And it's also, I think, the longer you work with your clients, the easier it is to understand what they value, what their triggers are, what's important to them, where you can give and where you can't give on certain stuff. So, like in my practice, rather than trying to represent 100 different clients and doing 10% of each client's work, I'd much prefer to have 5 or 6 or 7 clients where I'm doing 80, 90 plus percent of their work for them, where I could really provide more strategic advice to them, right? Because I understand their business more holistically that way. I understand, really what they're trying to accomplish from a platform perspective, as opposed to like, what we're negotiating for in a particular HMA or something like that.
What's an HMA?
A hotel management agreement.
Okay.
Sorry, right. So in the like when we represent, I'm typically on the owner side of the equation, right? So
Mm,
I work with all the major brands, but I rarely represent them. I
mm.
had one great experience getting to represent Hilton on a matter, and it was really fascinating to sort of be under the tent with them on that. It's really helped me understand, sort of things from the brand perspective.
Mm.
Because again, I'm typically
What made it so fascinating?
because I'm in that context. It's like I'm constantly negotiating with them as opposed to negotiating on their behalf.
Mm,
So in this deal, I got to negotiate on their behalf, and it's like such a reversal of roles for me when I'm almost exclusively on the owner side of the table. So to kind of hear what was important to the owners on that one. And there was stuff where we're like, oh yeah, I would be making that point too, or I would be thinking about that too. But it also, just on a going forward basis, it was just insightful in terms of being able to provide better advice to my own clients. Say, look, this is why
mm,
the brand cares about this, and
mm.
this is why it's important to them. Where can we figure out a solution to this? How can we get to a place where it still works for us? We still keep the brand on board that you clearly want to work with, and we get a deal done.
When as you're talking about that, it's making me think of constraints. And as annoying as constraints are, they're also they can be very instructive in helping find a solution. So I've heard you say a couple of times, figuring out what's most important to them in the
Mhm.
sense of meeting them where they're at. In providing furniture to hotels, invariably a constraint is budget. And
Mhm.
I find one of the best clarifying questions is, okay, well, there's 10 pieces of furniture in this room. There's a budget issue. Like, what's most important to you? And then when you ask that clarifying question, I find it really helps prioritize or deprioritize all the other competing things where, you know, it's like I love all of my children equally. And that's the case where, you have this one number, but then if it's what's most important, then you can like prioritize and make some less important. Children, if you're listening, I still love you all equally. So don't
My
worry about that.
grandmother used to ask me all the time who my favorite is, and I used to always
Around
explain,
others?
no, just her and me. She said, like, I know
Okay.
you have one. I know you must have one favorite. Who you can tell me. I won't tell anyone. I
Yeah.
don't know what her obsession was with that.
Did you ever tip your hand?
Of course not. I love all my children equally.
Good. See, there, your children are happy now too. But going back to that idea of constraints, um, I'm curious if you're onboarding a new client, right?
Mhm.
You'd rather work with fewer clients. So it's a new client that you're not familiar with. How do
Mhm.
you in onboarding them and getting to know them, how do you figure out or ask or clarify with them what's most important to them about them as a person or in a deal in particular? Because again, that must shed so much light and help provide so much clarity in trying to find that not zero sum answer and
Yeah.
finding an accretive solution
Yep.
to what's all trying to get done.
Yeah, and my gosh, it's the most rewarding thing when you get to that point, when you know what's important to your client, and you don't have to ask those questions anymore, and you could just push the ball forward on their behalf. They love that because you're
Mm,
taking that burden off their plate. You're not asking a million questions anymore. You've gotten your guidance, you know where they want to go with things, and you can check in with them and report to them, as opposed to saying, hey, I need your input on this following, list of items. It's going back to them saying, hey, I've been pushing this forward. Here's where we landed. Just wanted to make sure you're okay with everything. And they love that because everybody is
mm.
so time constrained. But the way
So
you
do you?
get there,
Oh yeah.
for me, it's. I know I haven't even answered your question yet. Boy, that's a
No, but
lawyer. That's a lawyer thing to do right
no,
there.
I knew you were getting there, but like
Yeah,
as you're talking, I'm like, okay, so what's a way like for people who are listening who are not lawyers, but
yeah.
they may potentially be service providers, like what's a good way to find out what's most important? Because part of the thing that I love is also shortening other people's journeys So
Yeah.
like to hear your experience of how you get to know that person or get to invest the time to get over that hump, I think it's
Mhm.
applicable to everything really.
You have to spend time together. There's just no get. You have to spend time together, and it's for me. It's that combination of informal time where you go out to lunch together, or you have a drink together, or you get your families together, and you really get great insights about people from that time spent together without it feeling like an inquisition or
Mm.
very formal. And then there's the more business side of it, right? Where you have to, at least initially, as you're onboarding a new client, it is just sort of being succinct about it, right? Where I'm not going to pepper them throughout a day and say, "Oh, hey, and I thought of this, and I thought of this, and I thought of this." It's like coming to them in an organized way and saying, "Look, this is the deal we're working on. Like, I know, we're trying to reflag two properties that you just bought in Northern California, and I can tell from the flag that they flew under to the flag that you want to fly them under, sort of where you want to reposition them. So here's sort of the few things that I'd like to speak with you about in order to make sure that as I'm negotiating these agreements on your behalf with the brand, with your lender, with any other vendors, this is what I need to know to make sure that I'm doing this right." And then initially, it is more checking in with these people, right? Like in the sort of first deal I do with somebody, there's a learning curve to it. There's just no getting around that. And one of the things I'll do with my clients is explain that to them and say, "Look, on this deal, I will probably take more of your time than I would otherwise like to. But just know that by doing it on this deal, you know, it will make things go so much more smoothly down the road. And the next deal and the next deal after that, we can operate on cruise control together." I mean, I'm working with a group now, Ohana real estate investors. They're based right here in NorCal. I was recently introduced to them by one of my partners, Peter Fischer, who's he's a labor and employment attorney, but he's got a great relationship with Ohana. He knew that they're working on a variety of transactions. He thought there'd be a good fit. Thankfully, he thought highly enough of me to introduce me to his client. And it's been a great relationship. I mean, since that first deal, I've helped them on a few others. And, it's getting to see more and more of their business, right? Like, it's not just helping them with a management agreement now. Now it's like management agreements, helping them on financings potentially. If they've got a dispute, with a tenant or with a manager, it's helping them on that. So it's getting more and more involved in their business. And like, that's where the joy is, like, because now I feel like I'm providing real value. I mean, like, I think there are a lot of people who could probably negotiate a management agreement, but I don't know if there are a lot who could manage, you know, the relationship more broadly than that. But I try to be very efficient about that. So it's not about
Mm.
peppering the client during the day and saying, "Oh, what about this? What about this? What about this?" with multiple emails. It's about saying, "Okay, here's the nature of the transaction we're working on. This is typically how I do it. These are typically the things that I would care about." And then I'll have, 3 or 4 or 5 questions ready to go for the client where I can say, "Look, these are the things I need to know in order to sort of push the process forward on your behalf." And then it's just, over time, keeping them informed and coming back to them for input whenever we might need it to get the transaction to that next step. But eventually, you get to the point with some clients where you've done enough deals with them, you know what they care about. You can operate quite autonomously, that's the joy of it at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Because
it's like that
Oh,
telepathic
yeah.
level
The client
almost.
loves you
Yeah.
at this point, right? Because you've now taken that responsibility off of their plate, and everyone is time
Mm.
constrained. So you just freed up time for them. Nothing makes me happier than being able to do a deal for a client where I know, they know, they are comfortable, they have security, um, and confidence that the deal is getting done while they're doing other things with their time. Like that's the value.
Going back to, figuring out what's most important to your client and looking at going from more your bankruptcy law practice beginning, or more of that standard, um, although no, that's not like a standard law practice either, but in looking at that transition from just regular business law to more focused hospitality law, was there a client that you had or an experience or a project or a deal once you started getting into hospitality that made a light bulb go off for you on how to figure out that important part, but also really focus on building that relationship, because relationships are so important in everything. But I think in hospitality, extremely
Yeah,
important.
I've been really, really lucky. There have been a few along the way that keep me engaged. And it's sort of, if your interest in whatever it is you're doing sort of, at some point sort of wanes, every time I'm getting to that point where I start to think, maybe I should just try to look at doing something else. I will be introduced to someone who's working on a project, or, they are just so engaging that you just sort of ramp back up again. You're like, I remember it now. I love it. Early in my career, I was fortunate to work for Chuck Feeney, who, if you're not familiar with Chuck, this is a person who Warren Buffett said that Chuck is his and Bill Gates' hero. Chuck started duty free shopping, um, and he started Atlantic Philanthropies. So Chuck's whole goal was to die broke. And Chuck, unfortunately passed away pretty recently, but his whole mantra was giving while living. So I was asked to help him sell two resorts in Guam and Saipan, so that he could basically take the proceeds and donate them to charity. And
Wow.
he had this great GC, Bob Goldman, who actually used to work at the firm where I was then working. And Bob and I had to travel the world together. And we went to Guam and Saipan. They insisted that I go to the properties. They insisted that I work with local counsel in person. And then he and I negotiated the sale in Hawaii because it was a Japanese buyer. And we were based in California, and Hawaii was midway. And we thought that was a fair compromise. So, I got to work side by side with Bob, who, he has a few years on me. So, if he's listening to this, Bob, don't be offended, but it's true. You have a few years on me. But it
Love
was
all,
just
serve
one of
all.
those deals where it was for all the right reasons, working with great people. Our counterparts on the other side were really engaging and easy to work with, and we got the deals done. And they were, I don't want to say they were super complicated deals, but they definitely had some hair on them.
Mm.
And we got them done. And then, it was one of those things. And after the deal was done, Bob confided in me. He said, when you were staffed on this, we were a little concerned that we got this kid basically when we thought we were going to get somebody more seasoned. And he said, it was great. Like, it was really, it was a great experience working with you. And, he and I still keep in touch to this day. And now, like I mentioned client Ohana earlier, I work extensively with another group based here in the Bay Area, JMA. And again, it's just really, really good people with great assets too. So, I mean, they own the Homewood Ski Resort here in Lake Tahoe. And, the care with which they treat my family and me when we go and visit that resort, it's above and beyond. It's no client has to do that for me, right? I mean, they're paying my hourly rate, but they embody hospitality. They do it the same way. I think they appreciate that I try to take care of them, that I go that extra mile for them. And they in turn go way above and beyond for my family and me, and make us feel like family, frankly, when we go and visit one of their properties. So, it's experiences like that where you want to kind of keep going with it. I'm also working with another client, great family, totally unlike anything I've done before. He made his money in the medical products industry, and he just bought, 1,000 acres plus back on the East Coast. And we're going to develop a world class resort there. And when I meet with this client, when I'm back on the East Coast meeting with them, I don't stay at a hotel. I stay at their home. And like this,
Mm.
it just shows you the level of um, it goes beyond the business, obviously, at that point. That's just, it becomes a special relationship when you wake up in the morning and your client is downstairs making breakfast for everybody. And this is gonna we're talking, this is not a small project. This is $1 billion project. So it's not just like a mom and pop kind of a thing, but it can have that mom and pop kind of a vibe if you're open to it.
Totally. It's interesting. I thinking about duty free stores or DFS.
Hmm.
I remember. I think I shared this with you when we were talking, but it must have been 10 or 15 years ago, before Apple was getting into the retail space. Um, th- I don't remember the magazine or newspaper I was reading, but it showed retail space or retailers who make the most money per square foot
Hmm.
per day, month, year. I don't remember what it was, but it was the top of the list was Tiffany's. It was like 700 and something dollars.
Yeah, per
They had
foot.
like six or eight, and but DFS was in there
Oh yeah,
also. It's a huge
great
company,
business.
um, and I forget the number of for Tiffany's. It was like 700 and something dollars a foot.
And DFS blew that out of the water, right?
No, DFS was below
Was it?
Tiffany's,
Okay.
but Apple came in. Apple
Oh,
came
right.
in to do their retail, and they never had retail experience, and they were like 1,500 or $2,000 a foot. So they basically blew that one out of the water.
Right.
But DFS is a pretty incredible business. And
Yeah.
was Chuck successful in his dream to die broke?
As far as I know, he was. I mean, he lived incredibly modestly. I mean, for somebody of his wealth and his accomplishment, it was so important to him
Did
to give
he
it away.
did he inspire if you know Warren, because Warren
Yeah.
Buffett also signed this
Giving while living.
agreement, I think with it was with a whole bunch of other billionaires. So
Yes.
him, Bill
Chuck,
Gates, was
Chuck
Chuck
was
was
the
one of them.
impetus for that. Yeah, that's
Ah, I
why I
didn't
think
know that.
Buffett and Gates, if I understand it correctly, that's why they look to Feeney as their hero. Chuck also basically funded the Cornell Tech campus in Manhattan. I think he gave a $350 million gift. Chuck gave, if I'm not mistaken, I think he gave close to, if not more than $1 billion back to Cornell University. But he also gave to, I mean, it was such a wide variety of things that he contributed to.
Mm,
But to, this is a guy who flew coach, well into his 80s, as I understand it, because he would rather take that money and give it away to a worthwhile cause. And that is just how he was wired. It's incredible.
wow.
So again, working for someone like that, it's inspiring. And then as it turns out,
Yeah.
the people who were in his organization were fantastic people too.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, if you look at the cast of characters who are in the hotel space, developing whether they're trophy properties or just to really deliver experiences, it really takes a certain mindset of really meeting others where they are, and and that whole idea of putting the deal together and finding that 1 + 1 = 3, where everyone is winning. You're providing jobs. You're you it's not just a real estate asset. There's a asset. There's a channel of business or multiple channels of business within a hotel. The layers of complexity become almost infinite, and I think that does attract a certain type of person or mindset that it's kept me in it for
Yeah.
almost 30 years. So
Yeah, I mean, isn't it great when you work on one of those projects where everybody just wants to make it happen? And by the
yeah.
way, it doesn't have to just be a deal. Like I said, I just wrapped up a settlement agreement, but everybody just wanted to make it happen. Everyone knew it was the right outcome, and we just
Mm.
figured out a way to get there.
And it's amazing. And I guess the other lesson here is, okay, so you have all these kind of like-minded or similar value-driven people,
Mhm.
and there's so many of us, and it's nice to be able to meet up with someone new like you at a dinner and realize, oh, okay, let's peel back the onion
Yeah.
on what and why we love about this industry so much.
Oh
That's
yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
cool.
That was a really great dinner. I mean, it was a good group of people that came together. What I found interesting about that particular conference was, and this is what back in January, I
Hmm.
spent more time at this conference with clients actually negotiating deals than usual. Usually, I'm at these conferences and it's just sort of more meeting people and chit chatting and finding out what's going on in the industry, and taking that temperature, getting the feel for what's going on. But this time around, found like there's just a desire. Maybe it's still pent up desire from all the things that didn't happen during COVID, but people are just so anxious to get their deals over the finish line that I spent a lot of my time at that conference actually with face to face, meetings, helping advance
Yeah.
ongoing transactions.
And just so everyone knows, the conference is ALICE, the American Lodging and Investment Summit,
Yes,
right?
sounds right.
That's what it stands for. And one of the things that I heard when I was there is that, and maybe this is a data, you just provided a data point in that to kind of validate it. And I don't know how to validate it, but they said someone said in this calendar year, there'll be more hotel transactions than any other calendar year previously. Are you seeing that, feeling that, hearing that?
We've been really busy. We've been really, really busy. I didn't, it hadn't even occurred to me that sort of more than ever. I just know that, we're busy doing deals just like that. Mostly on the buy side at this point.
Mm,
But it's definitely, I mean, 24 is off to a very strong start in terms of transactional work. It'll be interesting to see if it continues that way, right? Is I think we have supposedly another wave of maturities coming up at some point during this year. I mean, capital markets are still incredibly difficult. Rates are still, relatively high to what we've gotten accustomed to. So if we need to dust off sort of the restructuring skills and figure out, how to restructure some debt and equity, we can do it. But look, everyone's happier when it's new deals, right? And creating new value.
yeah. And from let's just go with the thesis that this will be a busier calendar year for transactions in hotels than most others.
Mhm.
Okay, we don't need to attach a superlative. In your experience, when those deals are happening, the horse trading, so to speak, what's the next action for the owner who acquires? Are they just reflagging? Are they keeping things as they are? Are they doing a full renovation and reposition? Like if you were to kind of
Hmm.
create a bell curve of like what a recently acquired property would do, um, in your experience, you don't have to be scientific, but
Yeah.
what's your gut on that?
Um, Look, I think each owner wants to bring their own touch to the property and their own value to the property. So
Mm,
they inevitably will bring some degree of change. I rarely see a client who's buying a property with the goal in mind of just keeping it as is, and they don't see a way of improving it. Right? There's always sort of the value add strategy. I think as you're pointing out, it's what's the range, right? Is it just new paint, new carpet, and something as simple as that, or is it let's get a new flag on there and really reposition this thing? It's the market around that property has really changed and it can be much better as something else. I mean, for us at Baker, I think we're seeing a little bit of everything in that regard.
mm.
I don't know that it's sort of one more than the other, but in each case, there's definitely a value add sort of, they want to put their touch on the asset and do something special with it.
So there's a value add thesis in most of them. It's not just, oh, this one's really performing. Let's buy its cash flow and kind of just set it and forget it and just
No,
maintain.
no, because the pricing rarely justifies that. If there's a sort of set it and forget it, I think
Is that unique to hotels where the pricing wouldn't justify?
um, I think in hotels in particular, yeah. I mean, office maybe you'll see more of that. Not so much office these days, right? But office
Mm,
generally, right? It's leased up. You know what your long term cash flow is going to look like. It's a bit of an annuity, right? So it might
yeah.
attract a different buyer. Hotels, yeah, I mean, again, maybe it comes back to that hospitality mindset, that service mindset of, you know, that's a great property, but we could do something even better with it. Um,
Yeah.
so it might just be part of the thinking there. But again, if you look at, I'm thinking about this in the context of how I provide service to my clients, but the way my clients provide service to their clients is returns. So, I
Yeah.
guess they're looking at, these different hotels and resorts and casinos and what have you. And they're thinking, okay, we can do something special with that asset and create a greater return for our investors, for our clients. So I think, maybe it's that hospitality mindset. And by the,
I think And it's also it's the hospitality mindset, and also like in those 3 points that you made of, like, I think it was satisfaction, security, and adventure. I think you said at the beginning, it's
or
that adventure, it's that
enthusiasm or
experience,
adventure. Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
creating that new experience, right?
It's
Because
exciting.
guests are always changing, markets are always
Yeah.
changing, locations are always changing.
It's
So,
exciting. It's
it
exciting to
yeah.
work on a hotel project. It's exciting to work on a casino or a resort. Like, you know that people are going to go and enjoy these places. And it's great, by the way, getting
Mm.
to do site visits with your clients. I worked on the city center development in Vegas and got to go to the grand opening. It was fantastic.
Oh yeah. Wow, that was a big one.
Yeah.
Um, if you think about, kind of, you mentioned office, but thinking about the returns that your clients are giving, or striving for their
Mhm.
investors, is there like a rule of thumb on, you know, multifamily to commercial to hospitality, as far as what types of returns are satisfying to LPs?
Yeah. I mean, look, hospitality, depending on the asset class within hospitality, right? You've got stratification there too, is between, sort of your trophy asset, which might attract an investor for one set of reasons. And then you've got limited service, which, might attract a completely different investor. Trophy assets, it might just be about preserving capital. Whereas, the limited service, it's all about just, you know, that's sort of more the set it and forget it kind of an asset,
Right.
right? But the returns on that could actually be much better than on a trophy asset. But some people just want to get to own, the Peninsula Hotel somewhere.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, it's sort of the usual formula of, the riskier, the higher rate of return that's expected. Historically, office was seen as a pretty safe asset class because, think about your guests or your occupants, right? Like, the guests at a hotel, it's a new, call it a lease every 24 hours, right? They're in and they're out. Whereas office, you've got people who are in there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So there
Hmm.
used to be greater security in office. Now it's since COVID, it's kind of been shook up quite a bit that way. Multifamily, for the longest time, everyone thought that was super secure, right? I mean, we have a housing shortage. But again, you're finding that it's really, it's about the quality of the underlying real estate at the end of the day. So, just because you've built multifamily, if it's not the right quality or it's not in the right location, you're not going to see your return on it. I think people who historically have also been very focused on one asset class versus another have now are more flexible about that. I think people who've historically
Mm.
only looked at, say, office are now thinking, geez, this isn't what we thought it was, or it's, certainly not in some places. We need to look beyond that. So, like logistics, for example, right? Like that was super hot during COVID. I was working with clients who were buying up whatever logistics space they could get their hands on. And now that's cooled off. So
Yeah.
kind of,
It's
depends on the
it,
times.
it yeah, it's interesting. I think, especially, you mentioned interest rates before. Um, when you're performing out an acquisition, and whatever those returns are, let's say they're 18 to 25%, they're somewhere hovering around 20%, I think, is a rule of thumb. And then you factor in what the financing costs are right now. I feel like that's they're kind of 3 or 4 times what they were just a couple of years ago, right? And that really must put a lot of pressure on getting deals done too, because they don't pencil out as easily
Oh,
because
yeah.
of all the financing costs.
Oh yeah, I mean there are plenty of deals that no longer pencil as a result of the financing
Yeah.
costs, right? And deals like refis that maybe we would have gotten done in 6 weeks, I'm fine. We're trying to get them done in 3 or 4 because when you get the financing lined up, you don't want to wait around for the next market turbulence to happen that can
Mm.
upset it or prevent a closing from occurring. So I've heard the expression, a quick deal is a good deal. And I think that's especially true in the land of finance because
Mm.
These days you don't know, what's in store. It's pretty unpredictable the last few years. So, when we get a term sheet locked in, we just want to move and get it done quickly. And sometimes that means putting pressure on our own clients to be responsive to diligence requests, for example, from the lender team, and knowing that right balance between pushing hard enough and becoming a nuisance, right? And doing what you
Right.
can to make sure that the deal is getting executed. Because the last thing you want to do is sort of, lose your financing, especially if you got a loan that's coming due in the next, 8 weeks or whatever it is. You want to make sure it's done.
Yeah. I mean, we're all reading about these in the papers and we're seeing it in person. It's cool to get your firsthand experience. Now, with the turbulence and the increased busyness and deal flow, as you're looking out into the future, what's exciting you most?
Oh, wow. Look, market turbulence always creates excitement, right? It always creates opportunity. I think if you have the right sort of mindset for it. We've got plenty of great clients who, they know how to capitalize on market turbulence, and they know how to take advantage of it as opposed to being frightened by it. And I think we as a firm also thrive in that environment. Like, we try to stay in front of those types of things too, where, we see something coming down the pike. It's all about getting the information out there to the clients and saying, hey, like, look, this is what we're seeing in the space. How can we help you with this? Or this is what we're seeing in the space. This is how we think we can help you with that, as opposed to putting it to them as a question, like being able to provide value up front. I think, look, hopefully it's the deal. It's the year like you were describing earlier, where it's just about getting more and more deals done. That would be great if we saw that. I think, if interest rates can drop a little bit lower, I think that would help ease a lot of fears and help us get even more deals done. So again, like, we've got a great pipeline, and we as a group, I think we're ready, we're prepared, and it's, I know we're working with a lot of great clients already, in terms of helping them execute on, whatever deals they've got going on and what they've got coming down the pike. So it's
Mm.
nothing. It's kind of, I couldn't even begin to predict at this point. I don't, the odds of my getting it right. These days, it's like when I was more of focused on restructuring. I remember thinking every time we would see a recession, like, oh, this is going to be it. This is going to be a really bad one. And, it turns out, no, like, people might be able to buy assets for, call it, 85, 75 cents on the dollar instead of 100 cents. But, you're not seeing the 25, 30 cent fire sales these days. Like, there's just a lot of capital out there. There are a lot of sophisticated buyers. And, the flow of information is so strong these days that, it's hard to find that sort of bargain basement 35 cent on the dollar, 25 cent on the dollar
That's
deal.
that's what I was most surprised about during COVID is, hospitality got
Oh,
slaughtered,
oh
right?
yeah.
And everyone, like, if you look at where you would think the money would be going and the deals would be going, would be find those 25 or 30 cent on the dollar deals. I'm sure there were a couple out
Yeah.
there, maybe in the commercial mortgage back kind of area where it's a little bit more difficult to restructure.
It was a very tight window of time when it looked like the world was coming to an end and you could get one of those deals, but it was really
How
tight.
tight of a window was it?
Months,
Months.
weeks, if not
Because
months.
okay, because on the other side of it, if that was the quote easy money, like, oh, we're gonna pick up,
Hmm.
you know, for cents on the dollar, some great properties. I I heard or read somewhere that there was like $1 trillion+ of cash that was on the sidelines
Right.
waiting to pounce on these
Right.
deals, but it never really
Well, the
materialized.
deals couldn't materialize, right? Because you had owners who didn't want to let go, right? They don't want the loss. And you had
Mm,
lenders who didn't necessarily want to take the assets back because, unlike 2008, where you really did have over leverage and mismanagement, you didn't have as much of that during COVID, right? Like, hotels weren't doing poorly because they were being mismanaged. They were doing poorly because no one was allowed to visit the hotels. There were no guests.
mm,
That's not a problem with management. So if a lender were to take that hotel back, what could it possibly do differently with it, right?
Start a
So,
management company,
or man,
which they don't
what
want
were
to
they
do.
going to do differently? There was nothing to manage. There
Nothing.
were no guests.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so it was similar to '08 in that it was sort of, extend and pretend, right? Where you just sort of let it go out longer. So to the extent that we were able to, like, we worked with clients on getting 3 to 6 month extensions on, loans and pushing things out. And we would sort of do it over and over again. Now, of course, our ask was always, look, let's just give us the 12-month extension to begin with, because we know we're going to be here 3 to 6 months from now. But, lenders wanted to keep that pretty tight as
Mm.
well. But the deals didn't happen because it's like real estate through so many other periods. If you could just hold on to the asset and weather the storm, if it's a good asset, you'll be fine at the end of the day. It's just a matter of weathering
And I
the
guess,
storm.
and perhaps 2008, if you think of like the invisible hand of Adam Smith and the free market, it kind of put the fear of God into a lot of developers and ownership groups because they didn't want to over leverage and
Yeah.
overextend themselves and get into that. So in a way, the market kind of works.
Yeah, and even if they wanted to over leverage after 2008, it was a lot more difficult to do that with lenders. Lenders were far
Yeah.
more disciplined since that experience, I think. So,
Well, and they're part of that invisible hand
Mhm.
as well, right? In that free market. So it's like it kind of self-regulating, quote unquote, their risk and how they approach the market.
Yeah, I
That's cool.
mean, like, you go back to the peak of the frothy buying, like 2006, 2007, right? Right before the music ended. I mean, people were doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. They were buying stuff without properly diligencing it. They were leveraging. I mean, you know, leveraging to the point where it was absurd, where they were leaving themselves no margin and they were putting no equity into the deals, really,
Yeah.
right? So they had no incentive if the times got tough to try to figure things out. It was easy to just walk away and say, oh, we didn't lose anything anyway.
Could you imagine what would have happened if COVID happened in like 2009?
Oh man, like a double whammy.
Yeah, that would have been because you would have had to. Oof.
Yeah, it would have been something. I mean, to have the financial collapse and then the sort of world collapse on top of that. Maybe there would have been more buying opportunities. Again, it's a matter of finding the opportunity in it at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And like, look at us now after COVID, right? I mean, hospitality has come back so strong since then. I mean, there was
Mm.
so much pent up demand. Now, business travel isn't back as strong as, pleasure travel, but there's still room to grow then, right? I mean, if the business travel comes back again, that would be great.
Yeah, and with the limited inventory, it should be really good.
Yeah, and then already, like,
Um,
the pricing is out of control, right? I mean, I don't know, like the last few times I stayed at places, I've, bug-eyed over the rates.
Oh, it's ridiculous, and the rooms are thrashed also,
Yep.
right? Because they're not reinvesting uh, in the capex and maintaining and updating. But whatever, that's a whole other story. Um, you from the time that you were at Cornell to when you figured out getting your JD MBA and then finding hospitality as a specialty within your law
Mhm.
practice. If you could go back in time to yourself in Ithaca and ask yourself your 19 or 20-year-old self, or give your 19 or 20-year-old self some advice at the what was that, the hot truck, was
Oh,
that the
yeah.
place you'd go get like
Yeah,
all your
yeah,
sandwiches?
definitely.
So if you magically appeared in front of your 20-year-old self in front of the hot truck,
Mhm.
what advice would you have for yourself?
That's actually an easy one, because it's something that I haven't figured out till much later in life, and that is really cherish the relationships that you have with people and put the time into those relationships that they deserve. It's both self-serving, but it's also an appreciation that I think I discovered as I've gotten older, and I've been through different
Mm.
experiences. I thought when I was at Cornell, just because I was a bright guy meant that I would just be successful. And I couldn't have been more wrong about what it takes to be successful. Now, I'm really lucky because, like I've had great friends who just, they understood that about me. They understood I was just sort of a nerd and I loved learning and I would do really well in school and I was a good friend, but I didn't always put the time and effort into the friendships that I think I could have or wish I had. I mean, that's something I would have done differently over time. Like my college roommates, I'm still super close with them. And now it's even better because I think I reciprocate the relationship in ways that I didn't always do previously. And then I think back to like the mentors that I've had along the way and the people who are like really trying to look out for me along the way. And I don't know that I appreciated it as much as I could have when I was younger or should have when I was younger. But in hindsight, I certainly do. Like when I first came out of law school, my first job, I worked for two partners who really had my back. And at the time, I presumed that if I do great work, people will always have my back. Oh, I'm doing great work. They'll take care of me. That is totally incorrect. Um, certainly within law firms, just because you do great work doesn't mean people will protect you and look out for you.
Mm.
So like, like those two people, I didn't really understand how good I had it with them. And when I told them I was leaving that firm so I could go move to Japan, they thought I was crazy. And now as a partner myself, I better understand why they thought I was so crazy to pick up and relocate. Not only change firms, but move to the other side of the world. It's not to say I would have done anything differently in terms of my career decision making, but I think I would have spent more of my time with people and then slightly less of my time sort of on my own doing whatever it was I was doing, reading whatever it was I was reading or learning whatever it was I was learning. I think I could have afforded to do slightly less of that and spend more time with the people because, I'm constantly gratified by the time that I spend with different people. Like, like our dinner, years ago, I would have skipped a dinner like that and just, no, I've got so much work to do. I'm just going to go back to my room and eat at my desk and just, knock out some more documents, do whatever I have to do. And it's taken a real conscious effort on my part to say, you know what? No, like I'm going to go to this dinner. I already know I'm going to know half the people there and I enjoy the time with them. I don't know the other half of the people who are going to be there and I might really enjoy it. Go to the dinner. So that's not only advice I would give to my 19 or 20-year-old self, it's the advice I would give to others at that age too, who are, if they're like myself, more introverted and less socially inclined. Take the time. It's you stand to learn a lot from the people around you. We just had our partner retreat in Phoenix and it was amazing. Like the Baker Hostetler retreat is great because it's so inclusive and it's so focused on bringing us together. And, I spent time with my partners there. Of course, we talk about business, but it's so much more. It goes well beyond that. And then we had a speaker come in, Christie Pink, who's with Ritz Carlton, and she talked about client service and service excellence. And it was a really great talk. I mean, not only is she a great speaker, very succinct, no sort of ums and ahs, she really knew her stuff. But the things she was talking about, as soon as her program ended, I pinged our managing partner and said, this should be mandatory for everyone at our firm. And I don't mean just the attorneys, support staff as well. Everyone should understand what she was saying about the importance of client service.
I 100%
Yeah, and
agree.
it was great. And
Did she write a book too?
I don't know. But I pinged her.
I,
I reached out to her afterwards and I just to let her know how much what she was saying resonated with me.
you know what? That when we stop, I would love to get her information
Sure.
because that whole Ritz Carlton way that um, Horst Schulze came up with, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Um, I always say like, hey, we're in a we're selling furniture, we're providing furniture, but it's really not that. It's the service.
Yes.
It's like, how do you get all the stuff designed, approved, shipped, delivered, problems dealt with
Absolutely.
without causing stress to others and really meeting everyone else where they are. And I think, and I think that applies to everything. That's why I think this podcast has really done so well and grown. It's because hospitality and meeting others where they are and that level of service, it applies to everything, and it can all be very instructive to help us improve.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that's why I was glad that we had someone like that come in to speak to us, because I think it speaks to our core values as a firm as well, right? Like that you had our highest revenue earners all taken out of work for that 2 or 3 days, right? And an hour and
mm,
change of that time was allocated to hearing this person speak about client service. And that's why I thought, like, it's if it's a part of our core culture, then it shouldn't just be the partners who are listening to this, right? And embodying that, right? It's not that I work for Ritz Carlton, she was saying. It's that I am Ritz Carlton, right? Now that's a little bit
yeah,
extreme, I suppose, but if you target that, maybe you'll get really close to it.
I 100% appreciate that.
Hmm.
And it's again, it all comes back to to values and like, what business are we in?
Hmm.
What business are we in? And it's in hospitality. And I would even say every business, it's about service and meeting others where they are. On that note, I have loved this conversation so much. And if people wanted to learn more about you or Baker Hostetler, what's a good way for them to get in touch?
They can email me at jddiener@bakerlaw.com. Visit our website, bakerlaw.com. We are not hard to find. Just don't confuse us with the other firms that also have Baker in their name. We're Baker Hostetler. But yeah, I'd be happy. Look, I love talking about hospitality. I love talking about the deals that we do. I love helping clients solve their problems, grow their businesses. So, I'm always happy to chat about any of those things. And again, I appreciate your having me on today. It was really great. Man, the time just flew. I knew it would.
I know. Well, I also want to thank Aggie because I know you were invited to that dinner. I had no plans that night, and Aggie invited me, and I just said yes,
She's
yes, of
great. We're
course,
working on a deal
of
together.
course.
So we've known each other for a few years now, and we're working on a project together. And it's great. You gotta love that, right? Like when somebody you've known for a long
Yeah,
time, and then you get to finally work together on something. So yeah, that was a great. There was a lot of
totally.
people at that dinner. That Keith Brennan was at that dinner too with Weitzman, and he and I are working on this project side by side, and it's been a fantastic experience. And in the small world,
Awesome.
I've worked with Keith's brother Coley. It's just the hospitality industry is just one of those industries.
Well, he's in Chicago, right?
So Keith is in Chicago. Yes,
Yeah, I should be there in a couple weeks.
should reach out to him. He's great. He's doing a great job on this development project that we're doing. I can't wait till it's public so we can share more about it.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you to you. I really appreciate your time and the conversation and just sharing your journey and putting yourself out there. So thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate your having me on. It's great catching up with you.
And I appreciate all of our listeners as well, because I wouldn't be talking to cool people like Jeff if it wasn't for you and the growth we have every single week. So if this has changed your idea on hospitality or meeting others where they are, please pass it along. We've grown organically through word of mouth. And please share, like, comment, all that stuff. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.